Hello, hola. Welcome to another episode of Spiritcraft, the podcast to nurture your soul and unleash the magic within. I am Marta, your host, and today we will be diving into the fascinating world of spiritual protection. So whether you're new to this concept or you're looking to deepen your understanding, this episode is all about laying the groundwork. We'll explore what spiritual protection actually means, why it's essential in our daily lives, and how to recognize when you might need it. Now, this is the first part of a two-part episode, and in the next episode, we will be talking about actual spiritual protection tools and techniques. Now, if you're not spiritual or don't believe in magic and energy work, you might be tempted to skip this episode, but please don't, because spiritual protection and grounding work are very useful for all kinds of people, no matter your beliefs. Before we begin, I want to remind you that if you have any questions about any of the topics that we discuss on the podcast, you can always send comments or contact podcast@spanishbruja.com, which I'll add to the show notes, and I'll respond. If you have a question, I can assure you others will be asking themselves the same, so don't be shy. Okay, grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's begin. To talk about spiritual protection, we must first look at what we're trying to protect. Have you ever felt creeped out by a place and not sure why? Or maybe you've ever sensed danger when you were in some situations? Have you ever walked into a room and felt a tense atmosphere? Or have you ever been exhausted and drained after spending time with someone? We all have a spiritual energy system. Some people call it aura. I believe it's our own energy shield, spiritual or not. If you believe in auras, you will describe it as an energy field that surrounds you, extending a few centimeters of your body. Our auras are different colors depending on how we feel, our mood, our intentions, our levels of energy, and so on. If you do have a more logical mind, it might be an electromagnetic field for you that interacts with the atoms in the world around you. Or it might be the infrared radiation our bodies and everything around us emit. In layman's terms, we could talk about boundaries, physical, psychological, or emotional. Although I've never been able to see auras properly myself, as a Reiki practitioner, I have felt this energy field around myself and others. In the same way that we might think about our skin as protecting our bodies and how we need to look after it, we can think about this energy field as protecting our spirit, so we also need to look after it. Spiritual protection encompasses all the techniques and tools that we may use to ensure that that aura, that energy field, is in good condition and that it can protect and alert us when needed. We may need spiritual protection in our daily lives for many reasons, not just when we're actively involved in spiritual work. Day to day, we may use the word spirit interchangeably with mood or enthusiasm, so we may use expressions like having a spirited conversation, breaking someone's spirit, being in high spirits, having a team spirit, and so on. So it would not be unthinkable to want to protect that sort of feeling, that state of being. In the physical world, parasites thrive by creating a parasitic relationship with another being or host in which the parasite benefits from something that causes harm to the host. Unfortunately, we might find ourselves on the wrong end of a parasitic relationship with people or in parasitic situations that drain our energy. I bet you can think of a person or two right now. A side note here, many people who do this might not even be aware that they do it. They might not do it on purpose. So there are certain factors that can cause our auras or our spiritual energetic fields to become weak or depleted. So things like stress, depression, pain, injuries, or even abusing substances and alcohol, they all can make us vulnerable to picking up any type of outside energy that is trying to look for a source of nourishment, that parasitic entity that I was talking earlier. Of course, if you're a spiritual worker, practice certain rituals or do energy work, it will also be very important to ensure that your spiritual energy field is in good condition. Think of it as your energetic shield or your spiritual immune system, if you like. However, in the same way that an overly enthusiastic immune system can cause problems with your health, using too much spiritual protection can also have some negative effects. The key here is to strike a balance and protect ourselves when we need it, not to build such great protective shells around ourselves that we cannot interact with our environments in a healthy and balanced way. So let's explore some signs that might indicate that you need to boost your spiritual protection. Now, keep in mind that some of these signs can also be symptoms of medical conditions, whether physical or mental. So it's always important to consult your doctor or your healthcare professional to check for more mundane causes. After all, if our health isn't in good shape, our energetic field will be weak and depleted no matter how much spiritual work we do. Our physical body and our spiritual self are deeply connected, so taking care of our physical health is the foundation upon which we build our spiritual practice. I'm going to be talking about some health conditions. So if this is a topic that you are very sensitive to or that you might find uncomfortable, I would suggest that you skip the rest of the episode. But I am not going to go into great detail, so you might still be able to listen to it. Just do what you need to do for your own well-being. The first sign that I want to talk about is feeling drained or exhausted after interacting with others. Basically, if you frequently feel tired or depleted after spending time with certain people or in very specific environments, it could be a sign that external influences are draining your energy. As a person with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, I am constantly exhausted, so I have to be very discerning about when it is my chronic conditions or where it is something that is attacking my energy field. I can say that to me, it feels very different. So it will be something that you will need to explore yourself. The next one is having a heightened sensitivity to others' emotions. I'm not talking here about being a deeply empathetic person, but more like when you're finding yourself absorbing the emotions or energy of those around you to the point that it affects your own mood or your own well-being. And that might indicate that it's a time to reinforce your energetic boundaries. If you have sudden or unexplained feelings of anxiety, fear, or paranoia, those can be caused by certain mental health conditions. But if those have been ruled out, it might be that you're picking up on negative energies or that your energy field is being disturbed. Intrusive thoughts or persistent negative thinking, self-doubt, or a critical inner voice are common symptoms of conditions such as depression, so it is essential to rule out any medical conditions, especially if these thoughts are pervasive or distressing. But if everything checks out, they could also suggest that you're being influenced by external negativity or that your energy field is compromised. If you're experiencing trouble sleeping, frequent nightmares, or waking up feeling unrested, it might be a sign that your spiritual space needs cleansing and protection. But again, bear in mind that sleep disturbances can be linked to stress, anxiety, or sleep disorders. Unexplained aches, pains, or feeling generally unwell without a clear medical cause might indicate that your energy is being affected. And by this, I mean that you've been checked out by a healthcare professional. As much as I am a spiritual and magical worker and a Reiki healer, I firmly believe that any spiritual worker should first ensure that any medical issues have been ruled out or are being treated alongside any spiritual protection work. So keep an eye out on the people you work with. Make sure that they don't tell you to stop seeing a doctor or anything like that. That is a big red flag. The key here is that there is not a medical condition or cause that might be causing this pain. Next is feeling off or out of balance. A general sense of being ungrounded, scattered, or disconnected from yourself or your environment can signal that you need grounding and protection. However, these feelings can also be symptoms of mental health conditions like anxiety or dissociation. So it's essential, once again, to consider both spiritual and psychological perspectives. If you find yourself in a string of conflicts or arguments, or you're experiencing a series of unfortunate events, it could also be a sign that negative energy is influencing your life. If your mind feels foggy or you're having trouble concentrating and making decisions, it might indicate that your energy field is cluttered and needs protection. And I know I sound like a broken record, but again, some conditions such as ADHD, chronic fatigue syndrome, or fibromyalgia, as well as stress, can cause difficulty in concentration. And the last one that I want to talk about today is if you notice that you're consistently attracting negative people or situations or even spiritual entities, it is a clear sign that your protective boundaries need strengthening. As you can see, there might be many signs that you need spiritual protection, and they tend to mimic symptoms of some medical conditions, so you might wonder whether you need spiritual protection at all. And I want to emphasize balancing spiritual practices with self-care in all areas. If any of these signs resonate with you, consider incorporating spiritual protection, but also please don't hesitate to seek professional advice for any physical or emotional challenges. Remember, it's not an either-or situation. So by now you might be thinking that it's normal to be in these situations from time to time or even regularly, because after all, who hasn't interacted with a negative person at some point or had a bout of bad luck, right? Let me stress that discernment is critical for some of these signs. While missing your train or losing your keys might be a random thing not worth questioning, if you suddenly seem to get everything wrong and things outside of your control keep getting in your way, or your plants die, your pet also gets sick, and you break your brand new shoes, and you lose your keys on the day that you miss the train for an interview to your dream job, etc., etc., then it might be worth doing some spiritual investigation and protection. Most of the signs that I've mentioned should be unusual and out of the ordinary, and they happen all of a sudden. The effects are also very noticeable. If you've been working longer hours and staying up late watching TV, it would make sense that you wake up tired. We're talking about things that make no sense and have no explainable cause, and also no medical reason. I would like to talk now about some of the common questions that people have asked me around spiritual protection. One of the questions that people tend to ask or tend to not be sure about is if spiritual protection and spiritual care is the same as therapy. Now, as a spiritual worker and a Reiki healer, spiritual life coach, I understand that, first of all, people might not have the disposable income to attend spiritual life coaching as well as therapy. They are different, and as I always say, they complement each other. They're not either or. I would never say have spiritual care or spiritual protection without therapy if that is what you actually need. If you have to choose between one of them, my recommendation would always be to seek help from therapy or counseling first. And then once you have those basics under control, then you can start looking into your spiritual protection in a more professional setting. They are not the same. They complement each other. And off the back of that question, people often ask who can provide this spiritual protection for them. Now, I firmly believe in do it yourself. When I was a personal trainer, my main focus was to give my clients the tools so that they could actually do the work themselves. I didn't want them to depend on me for the full length of their journey. So in this case, it's pretty much the same. If you have never done any spiritual work or any spiritual protection, you might be feeling lost or even unsure about your skills. Maybe you're scared about what might be happening. So in some cases like that, it is perfectly okay to look for a mentor or to find a spiritual worker, someone that can help you get started in this journey. My goal is always to ensure that you have the tools that you need to look after yourself and to empower yourself. So if you know a little bit about spiritual work, magical work, you are very into self-care, then you are the one that's going to be doing all of the spiritual protection, definitely the maintenance. If you need a massive cleansing or anything like that, then yes, I understand that you might want someone external to do it, but you are going to be the one that will have to keep that protection going. If you're not religious or super spiritual or anything like that, you can still have spiritual protection done. You might not be talking as spiritual protection. You might be saying things as boundary setting. And it's a way of not only putting in place some boundaries around people not talking to you in a certain way, but also standing your ground in the space that you inhabit, physical, mentally, emotional, and yes, spiritual. Don't think that you have to be part of a specific religion or you have to believe in the same things that I do in order to get this energetic protection that you might be needing. I know that today's episode feels a little bit shorter than usual, but remember, this is only the introduction, the part 1 episode of the spiritual protection and grounding practices, which is a 2-part episode. Please feel free to send any questions or any comments that you might have around spiritual protection, any things that you want me to talk about in the next episode, and I'll try to fit it in, either next week or in a blog post that will complement all the information that I'm giving you. Thank you so much for joining me today as we explored the foundations of spiritual protection. We've covered what spiritual protection is, why it's so crucial, and how to recognize when you might need it. And understanding these basics is the first step in safeguarding your energy and your well-being. Hopefully you're not freaking out by now, because after all, I said I would discuss some techniques and tips to protect yourself and your spiritual energy field, so I got you. In our next episode, we will dive into some practical techniques that you can use to protect and ground yourself effectively. So make sure to tune in, and until then, stay mindful and stay protected.